Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about Ra in Age of Mythology Retold, and why exactly he is currently the single worst god in Age of Mythology Retold multiplayer. Because there are many good reasons behind Ra's weakness. In fact, they gave him a 10% buff and it hasn't really changed anything for him. See, the problem is Ra is potentially a good god for longer games, for team games, but not for shorter games. So let's take a look at his benefits, his strengths, and his weaknesses. Well, his weaknesses are all related to the fact that he has nothing special in the early game. Nothing to really help him out in that kind of situation. And that is, by the way, a sort of inherent weakness that the Egyptians can absolutely struggle with. Why do I say that? Well, the reason I say that is due to the fact that Egyptian tier 2 is not particularly great. Their strength is in tier 3, like Migdal's strongholds and all that. But the difference between him and Isis and Set is that Isis and Set have very significant benefits to either make tier 2 work, or more importantly, to get past tier 2 as quickly as possible. You consider Isis's protection benefit with monuments, you consider her healing benefit, her favor benefit. I mean, it's only with the Pharaoh empowering, but still, it's pretty strong. Her scouting benefit as well, with obelisks and technologies costing 10% less. All of that is pretty strong. Then you have Set. Set may not seem like he has an initial benefit, but he absolutely does have a very strong one with animal conversion, because he can use that animal conversion to secure hunted animals. And through those hunted animals, he can end up having a better food source than many other people, than many other major gods, because hunted animals give you the fastest food generation in the game, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, it's certainly better than berries. Not quite sure about herdables, where those stand. Herdables are weaker without the upgrade. Not quite sure what the gathering rate is exactly with the upgrade, but it's just kind of worth pointing it out. And besides, he also has a cost reduction for barracks and Migdal stronghold units. Ra doesn't have these benefits. And also, we can talk about like his scouting benefit, or Isis's, prosperity and trickle of food. So we look at Ra. What does he have? He has a 15% benefit in terms of HP for camel riders, chariot archers, and more elephant units. That is a very strong late game benefit. Early on, don't get me wrong, if you could get very quickly with Ra to tier 3, that would be very strong. But you can't get to tier 3 as quickly as Isis or Set can. That is the downside. But if you were to play a longer game, and if the meta were to shift towards longer games, you would see a very different situation. In particular, I would say like the 15% HP for chariot archers, which are a really good unit because of the harass potential, the damage potential, that would be very damn significant. But it doesn't necessarily apply because, yeah, the way that games are being played right now is about that rush, it is about that early aggression, it is about that early map control. The average game duration is roughly 16 minutes, 17 minutes or so. Many games don't go past the 20-minute mark. Like, you could look at statistics, as I've said before, maybe 1 in 10 games online and ranked at a decent level of play, not on all levels, of course, but at higher levels, the top 1,000 players or so, you would find that a lot of those games, like only 10% of games are probably 20 minutes or longer. And the vast majority of those, by the way, are just roughly 20 minutes, 21 minutes. That gives you an idea. Now, don't get me wrong, in 21 minutes you can get to Age 4, you can start pumping out some really high tier stuff. You might even be able to get to Titan, but still, a consideration to be given the current pace of the game. So that's one problem. Then, let's talk about the Pharaoh empowering monuments. This seems like a great ability, in theory. Why doesn't it work? Well, the reason this doesn't work is because priests, like priests empowering, the priest empowerment, why doesn't it work is because priests are not cheap. They are a very expensive unit, and you want to use them for other things. You want to use them for scouting. You want to use them in combat because they're your anti-myth unit. You don't want, in the early game, especially in Age 1, Age 2, even a good portion of Age 3, you don't want to, one, recruit a significant number of priests unless you literally have no other choice. And even if you are recruiting a significant number of priests, you don't want them to sit around. They are combat units. You don't want them to sit around the base for the empowering benefit. So, while in a long game, and even in a long game, you could question the strength of all of this, because ultimately, you're gonna have a situation where you, even a longer game, even with Pharaoh empower monuments, empowering nearby buildings and all that, even then, you are not going to just, want to have a good number of priests sitting in your base. And besides, by the way, with your Pharaoh, like, oh, you're going to use your Pharaoh to empower buildings with a nearby monument. Okay, but the problem there is it's 70%. Like, if it was 100%, sure, that would be a significant benefit. Maybe that's what Ra needs. That if a Pharaoh empowers a monument, you get 100% efficiency for buildings in a radius for that monument. That could be significant, but 70%. So you're sacrificing in one specific area to benefit the buildings you have. Also, it forces you to potentially build stuff within that radius, which creates vulnerabilities in your base design. So not great either. Then, we have Rain. Rain is the single worst god power in the game that any god starts with. We can talk about Gaia, we can talk about Uranus. These are useful abilities. All of these are useful abilities. Yes, Freyr's Golden Boar is too expensive to recast, but it's still very useful on a first cast. The problem with Rain is that it is not useful until you get farms. And a lot of the game meta right now is, and even going forward, what is important is to stay on huntables, stay on berries, stay on hunts, stay on berries, stay on herdables for as long as possible. Not to build farms. Even if you can get cheaper farms and you can do so as Ra, you still want to delay that for as long as possible. So this is a benefit that only applies in the long term. If there was some kind of benefit to huntables, for the duration of it, that could change the game a lot. Or, a berry benefit. That could, again, change the game a lot. But that's not how this works. And that is a fairly substantial problem for Ra. Furthermore, his minor god selection. It's not bad in tier 3 or tier 4. You get Sobek, who has mobility. You get Sekhmet, who has extra benefits to chariot archers. You get Horus in tier 4 or Osiris. Strong choices. You do miss out on Thoth, and that is a problem. The reason that is a problem, it lies in the fact that, and by the way, just going to point it out, that would make more sense for us, Isis, to, have freaking Horus, just, from a mythological standpoint. But the problem, in Age 4 with missing Thoth is a significant economic benefit and a significant military benefit. Horus and Osiris are strong, don't get me wrong on that, but I would say Ra ends up worse for it by not having access to Thoth, as opposed to Set and Isis, who do have access to Thoth. I honestly, you could switch the minor god selection in tier 4 around between Isis and Ra, and it wouldn't necessarily hurt Isis that much. It would, however, benefit Ra. But beyond that particular aspect, though, look at tier 2. You either get Bast or Fa, compared to, Anubis and Bast, or Anubis and Fa for Set. Now, you can say, well, Set doesn't necessarily have it better. He does. in a lot of ways. The reason he does is because Anubis is a really powerful god. He gives you 25% monument benefits. Yeah, you can argue, well, you can empower those monuments and get that benefit anyway. But again, it's resources. Now, Bast isn't necessarily the problem. She does offer some tangible benefits with regards to food and with regards to wood, undeniably so, but she is lacking in certain ways. Like, Bast can be great in a longer game, to be sure, with certain units. Absolutely. But you look at Fa, like, yes, Shifting Sands has benefits, to be sure, but the Wadjet, honestly, it's kind of the worst myth unit to get in the game. Like, I'm not joking on this. Yes, it is a myth unit that you can build easier than many other myth units in the game, to be certain on that. But compare a Wadjet to a Chariot Archer, I'd rather get the Chariot Archer, to be honest with you, if I'm making that decision. And while you do have farm gold cost and build time being reduced significantly by Va, the other benefits that he provides, like the Slinger benefit, the Spearman benefit, and the Axe benefit, not only are those units not particularly great, so those upgrades don't feel that great to begin with, but here's the thing. Ra's benefit is focused on Migdal Stronghold units. So Fa ends up being redundant, because the moment you get Migdal Strongholds, that's what you want to go for. That's what you want to focus on. Those kind of units. And yes, it is a limitation on recruitment. That's another thing, by the way, to mention this. Yes, you get that extra HP. But Migdal Strongholds themselves are a limitation, because there's only so many you can get of those due to their cost. And so your recruitment can end up being limited in that respect. Sure, you can empower, you can use that benefit, but consider like the minus 25% gold cost wood set, and then reducing the cost of the units in those Migdal Strongholds. I'd say that's more substantial over there with regards to set. And while Isis doesn't have that kind of benefit, to be sure, keep in mind, she generates a lot of gold. To begin with Prosperity, she has Technology, minus 10% cheaper. So both Isis and Set end up being ahead. Those are the kind of problems. If games were longer, if the game wasn't so focused on aggression, map control, early map control, things would be different for Ra. But given the way things are played right now, he just doesn't work as a god. And this is actually one major exception, I would say, to the rule. Because you look at all the other gods in the game. It doesn't matter who you're talking about. Even, weak gods, or the ones that are doing poorly right now in the meta, at least on a higher level, like Gaia and Freyr, all that. Even Thor, to some extent, those gods still have over 40% win rate across all brackets. Ra has less than that. He's approaching 30% win rates. That is how bad he is, and it's for these reasons. And yes, Skin of the Rhino is a nice benefit, undeniably so, helps protect you against raiding, but you lose control of the map. It doesn't matter how durable your villagers are. If you can't contest the map as effectively as other gods can, then you're going to end up falling behind compared to those other gods. And that is a pretty big issue. And also, can I just mention that for someone who's focused so much on priests, which Ra absolutely is, the fact that you don't have Nephthys does actually hurt you quite a lot, because Nephthys does increase their damage against myth units, and you're lacking that. You're also lacking the minus 30% gold cost for priests that she gives you. So you, on one hand, are more reliant on priests than anyone else, but you don't have the same kind of benefits that Isis has or Set has. Like that is the combination. That is the combination you're dealing with. That is why you get these problems. Adding on top of each other, creating issues for Ra. But strength-wise, you know, just to emphasize this, longer games, like the farming benefit, if you were to end up in a game where you were using a lot of farms, it would be a very different discussion, to be certain. One shouldn't underestimate Horus or Osiris either. Those are significant benefits in a longer game. If you can amass a significant number of troops from Migdal strongholds, you could end up in very favorable trades because of that 15% HP benefit. Here's my perspective on what they should change with Ra. Reduce the HP benefit, but give us economic benefits. Like, you know, 5% HP, but with a much better economy to deal with the early game aggression. I think that would be a good trade-off. And also give us a freaking priest cost benefit, because as things stand right now, it isn't a great situation to be dealing with respect to the priests. Like, you know, maybe change hands of the pharaoh. Just an idea with respect to that. Costin signing out. Stay tuned for more.